All right, CNT 120, Chapter 1 Lab. We are now on Part 3 or Layer 3. So Layer 1, we spent time cabling up the laptop and making sure we have a good physical link. Part 2, we installed a NIC in the Harrisburg PC and then cabled it up. And then we took a minute and looked at the MAC address that's burnt into the network card on that PC. So now we're going to look at Layer 3. Well, Layer 3 is usually is focused on moving data from A to B. And that's usually through things like routers. And routers are reading things like IP version 4 addresses. So on this part, we're going to be focusing on the IP addresses that are in our network and there to help move things around the network. So let's start with the Harrisburg PC. Harrisburg PC, I'm going to open the desktop. And I'm going to, as you see here, we're going to open a command prompt and we're going to go back and look at that IP config thing again. So with my command prompt here, I'm going to issue just the IP config command. Nothing more, just IP config. This does not show me the MAC address, it just shows me the IP. And again, I'm focusing on the fast Ethernet port. When I look at this, I'll see that I do see a fast Ethernet connection. So we know the NIC is there and installed. But if I look closer at the IP version 4 address, I'll see it comes up as all zeros. Well, that's not a valid address to use in a network. Think of that almost as like having on your house, on your mailbox of your house, 0 Main Street. Well, that doesn't work. You can't deliver mail to 0 Main Street, so to speak. So this is not a valid address in my network. All right. Well, let's take a look. Let's see if we can't figure out a way to get an IP address for this machine. So I'm going to close this command prompt. Let's go over here to the IP configuration on this PC. So I'm going to open that up. I'll notice that it's set for static. Static means I actually have to manually plug these numbers in. You notice when I click on them, they highlight up like, oh, they'll let me do it. But you'll notice that they're blank. Nothing is plugged in there. Well, in many networks that we work with today, there is some sort of device out there. It might be a server, it might be a router that's configured to hand you addresses via what's called DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. This is almost like a bowling shoe rental counter. You basically ask to borrow an IP address and it gives it to you, and you don't have to worry about filling this information in. So if I click on this DHCP button over here, it's going to request an IP and hopefully fill in the correct information from me. And it actually did. The Harrisburg PC got it from this router up here. I have this router configured to hand out IP address information to any device in the network that requests it. So we now have an IP subnet mask gateway and DNS server filled in for this machine. So let's go back now and look at IP configuration. So I'm going to close this. Let's go back to the command prompt. And now let's run an IP config. When I do that, I'm now going to see my addressing filled in. I have a valid IP, subnet mask, and gateway in there. The IP address is identifying this machine at layer 3, so things like routers can communicate with it. The subnet mask indicates what part of this address is network, subnet, and host. Again, we'll talk about that in Chapter 3, so don't let that, worry you right now. And the last thing is the default gateway. Well, that's the address of the router, most likely, that it's attached to, that can get it out of that network and either to the internet or to another network. So that address right there, that 10.1, is actually this router right here. That's what that is. So with DHCP, we were able to pick up an IP address from the router so that I have valid IP addressing information to hopefully have this device communicate on the network. Well, let's check out the laptop and see if it's in the same boat. I'm going to pull up the laptop, command prompt, IP config, and I'll see, yep, it's all zeros. There's my fast Ethernet. It's all zeros. So, okay, let's close that. Let's go to IP config. It's set for static. Let's go DHCP. It's requesting an IP, and it should fill it in. Yes. And you'll notice it comes up with 52. This was 51. This is 52. They have to be unique, otherwise they would conflict. Just like, on mailboxes, if I had a house labeled 101 Main Street and right next door was 101 Main Street, they would conflict. The postal carrier would have no idea who to deliver the mail to. All right, so those are now unique addresses. Well, if I go back to the command prompt and do ipconfig, I will see there is that information filled in for me. Yahoo. Okay, we now have a valid IP address for both the Harrisburg PC and the Harrisburg laptop. Okay, so let's gather that information and add it to our text file. I'll do it from the laptop here. That's good. I'll highlight this right here. I'll right-click copy, and I will open my text file, and I'll come down here and I'll say layer 3 address. I'll put in here IP address to remind me from my Harrisburg laptop, and I will paste that information in. Okay, so there is my layer 3 addressing information, in this case from the laptop. Excellent. Okay, so we have that. So we now have addresses here, and if I hover my mouse over the Philadelphia PC, I should see that it comes up with and it does, 192.168.30.101, and I'll come over here to the laptop, and I'll hover my mouse over and I'll see 192.168.30.100. So that comes up with an IP address too. So all of my major devices have valid IP addresses, so I should be able to communicate between them. All right, so let's do that. If I want to communicate between devices, I can do a simple test using what's called ping. Ping is a way to send a little data packet, a little chunk of data through the network, and if everything's functioning, if everything layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 is functioning, it should respond and send a reply back. So we're going to do that. I'm going to look at the address of the Philadelphia PC over here, and I see it's 192.168.30.101, and I'm going to jot that down or remember that, one of the two. I'll give you a space here to do that. And I'm going to go over here to the Harrisburg PC, and I'm going to ping that address. I'm going to use the command ping, and then I'm going to plug that number in, 192.168.30.101. And I need to make sure that is correct. So if need be, I'll hover my pointer over it again, 30.101, okay. Make sure that is correct. Ping 192.168.30.101, and we'll hit the enter key. What that's going to do is send a little data packet over to that PC. If it's there and working, it'll respond and reply. You'll notice the first one got kind of lost in transit. That's okay. I'll repeat the command, 192.168.30.101. This time I should have 4 successfuls, that's fairly normal to have happen. We now sent a ping over, and it replied to us and sent it back saying, yes, I'm here, I'm working. Almost like ringing the doorbell and somebody yelling, yep, I'm here, or come around the back door. Okay, one of the two. So this is actually a successful reply showing that layer 1 is working. Layer 2 is working. Layer 3, all this layer 3 is working from here to there. That's the only way that data would have gotten there and gotten back. So I am going to again save that. I'm going to save that and put that in my notepad. So I have that result. So again, I'm going to highlight this guy. I'll highlight the whole thing. Right click copy. Come over here. And I'll do my layer 3 ping. And I'll paste that in. There we go. So now I have a successful ping between my two devices. And that is my layer 3 information. That is my layer 3 information. All right. Layer 3 is all about my IP addressing and my routers and things moving data through based on those IP addresses. When you really get down to it, it's these devices here that are reading that and moving it through the network to over here and then back. All the devices have to read that layer 3 information. All right, great. There is layer 3, looking at my IP addressing and that sort of thing. Next podcast, we'll take a look at layer 4.